Hi, everybody. This is Bob Gale, co-creator of Back to the Future, and you're listening to Brad Gilmore.
Doc! Okay, relax, Doc. It's me. It's Martin.
No, it can't be. Just sent you back to the future.
Yeah. Oh, I know you did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Great Scott.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Whoa, this is heavy.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time for the best film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore. On today's episode, I'm going to take you through my trip to New York City, New York, to see Back to the Future, the musical. You'll hear my wife and I's pre-musical thoughts, during the musical, and a little bit after. And then I'm welcoming on Tony from Back to the Future, the musical fans, and Eric Tate returns to the podcast for his third time, and we have a full-on spoiler discussion of Back to the Future, the musical. I mean spoilers, so if you do not want to know anything about the musical, do not listen any further to this edition of Back to the Future, the podcast, Season 10, talking Back to the Future, the musical. Okay, we are here at Bush Intercontinental Airport, standing at gate C10, ready to board our flight to Newark, which is New Jersey, for everybody who doesn't know. I'm here with my lovely wife, Farah. Farah, say hi.
Hello.
So we are getting ready to get on the plane. We're going to go to New York, and tomorrow we're going to see Back to the Future, the musical. How does that make you feel?
I'm really looking forward to it.
I know. When did you buy what were these tickets for? You bought them from what, my birthday?
I literally can't remember, but some sort of celebration, or maybe just because I'm the best wife.
She is the best wife. But we're going to be boarding here shortly and then flying off to NYC. And I'm really excited. We're going to bring you the whole experience from top to bottom of what's going to happen here as we embark on the journey to Back to the Future, the musical. All right, we are waiting the Uber. We're here in New York City. We're waiting the Uber to come pick us up and take us to the Winter Garden Theater. Isn't that what it's called? The Winter Garden Theater, where they're going to be showing Back to the Future, the musical. My wife and I are ready for this to go down. We're going to bring you our second-by-second thoughts. We're going to talk about the set, the theater, the queue, the gift shop, everything. It's about to get real, guys. All right, so we're here in front of the Winter Garden Theater in New York, New York. Farah's cold, right?
Yeah, it's a bit nippy, but it feels nice. It's refreshing.
We're looking at a big poster of some of the original members, of Back to the Future: Chris Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, Leah Thompson, and Huey Lewis. Michael J. Fox called this spectacular. The cast is dynamite. Casey Likes is a terrific Marty. Roger Bart has always been something of a genius. I will definitely see it again. Chris Lloyd said Back to the Future on Broadway is an amazing on every level. Roger Bart has brought his own genius and creativity to the role of Doc, and it's wonderful. Farah, I don't even really know what to expect.
I'm excited. I really am. I'm excited to see what the show is like. I'm excited to hear the music, see the costumes, the characters.
Because I've not listened
storyline
to anything. I haven't read anything. I've had a couple of conversations on the podcast about it, but I don't know much about it.
He's got DeLoreans on his tie.
I do have a DeLorean tie on.
And it's
right
very
now.
nice. It's like an emerald green with like a
mini DeLorean.
Little mini modern day DeLoreans.
That's right. So let's go get a hot dog.
Okay, hot dog.
And then we're going to stand in the line to see.
What's that saying? Hot dog.
I don't know.
Something about a hot dog.
Like hot dog it?
Hot dog it. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Sayings from the South. We're going to oh, look, there's the store. We'll have to go into the Back to the Future store. We're going to get a hot dog, and then we're going to come wait in line. All right, now we're sitting in the Winter Garden Theater. You hear the music. It's there. Huge screen right there in front of us. So, like, it's cool how they did the sides. You see the, what are those called? Like the balcony seating? You know? You see how they have, like, the kind of
outline. It looks like a digital computer generated.
Like inside the flux capacitor type stuff. And you see the whole theater is kind of outlined like that. We are center right on the mezzanine. Perfect view. Take a picture, babe, of the Back to the Future, the musical.
Take a picture, babe.
This is pretty cool. It's a good size theater. I don't know how many seats. I'm excited. Hey, what are your first impressions here?
I'm really excited. This is very cozy, welcoming. The lights are flashing blue. Blue is a good color.
Blue is a good color.
And I don't think we've been to this theater, have we?
No. We were just passing Chicago, where we went and saw Pamela Anderson in Chicago.
I like it. The seats are comfortable.
Look at this. No photography during the show. It might interrupt the space-time continuum.
But it's okay to photograph this and
hashtag Back to the Future. All right. Well, here we go. We have the playbills in hand. There's your playbill.
Thank you, sir.
We're here at the intermission. Farah, just one word so far to describe your thoughts of what we've seen to this moment.
Exhilarating.
I say mine, fun, right? It's been very fun the whole time. There's
Excitement.
There's a lot of changes from the original movie that I'll go into probably later on in the show. But yeah, who stands out to you so far, like actor-wise? What do you think of Marty?
Marty's good. He's nailing it with like the voice.
The character who plays the actor who plays George. Yeah.
Yes, I can tell you love him.
Well, he sounds just like Crispin Glover. What do you think of the Doc?
Doc is quirky. He's funny.
Yeah.
For sure.
A different energy than the Chris Lloyd Doc.
Yes,
Brown, right?
it is. It's more Joker-y vibes.
Joker?
I don't know.
You think he's acting like the Joker?
A little bit. Or
How?
like Beetlejuice.
I can see Beetlejuice.
Maybe Beetlejuice-ish.
Not the Joker. He's not killing anybody.
I like the Joker.
The production is fantastic. I mean, I don't know
the lights.
The lights, the sets, the changing of the sets, the clothes, the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And
and then
what they have on the screen.
And the way the DeLorean made its entrance.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden
awesome.
it like went off and I didn't see where it came from.
Yeah, it was like screeching through the stage and then all the lights and the sound effects really set it off.
We'll report more back when it's over.
Thank you for tuning in.
Hold on. All right, we're walking through Times Square. We just left Back to the Future, the musical. I asked my wife, what did she think? What did you think?
It was spectacular. Absolutely amazing.
Does it rank high for you as far as like the shows that we've seen and the plays that we've seen?
Yeah, almost. I want to say it's up there. Could be number one.
I think it's as far as
it probably is number one.
The production was out of this world.
Lighting, sound, what are those called? Not the equipment,
like the production, the sets.
Yeah.
The stage, the props.
The equipment, props.
It was incredible, you know.
I know.
Okay, let's see. Let's go another block up that way. All right, guys, welcome back to the Future, the podcast. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, joined by a couple of my favorite folks in this BTTF community, joining me to talk about Back to the Future, the musical that I finally saw after all this time and all this anticipation. Joining me is Eric from collectbttf.com. Eric, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
Good to have you back on. And joining the podcast again, Tony from Back to the Future musical fans. Tony, how's everything going over there in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for having me again, Brad. Good to see you.
Good to see y'all, man. And I know actually y'all got to meet at the musical, right?
That's correct.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
And was that at the premiere of the Broadway opening week, or where was this? When was this?
That was the opening preview, I believe, on June 30th is when we first met. Yeah.
That's right.
And was it one of those things like, you know, the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other? Was it one of those, Tony, where you're like, hey, it's you?
There was a lot of that going on with a lot of people dressed as Marty. I think it was like, you know, people were getting together and, you know, giving stickers and badges out and saying hi. And, you know, a lot of the time, you know, I know Eric's page and website, but I don't think I ever seen his face. So a lot of these people, it's like you're trying to put names to faces, and like, you know, sometimes like, what's your Instagram handle? Put that to a face instead. Yeah, no, there was quite a few of us all gathered there for the opening preview. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
we had met up. I introduced myself. My wife was with me, and we all just hung out for a while. And while we were waiting for the store that's there to open, I posted a picture from the outside. So Tony must have gotten, you know, seen it on his phone. He's like, "All right, who here is collect BTTF?" I was like, "Yeah, that's hi." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Then you know, the rest is history. So
Then the rest is history. And then now for the opening previews, and Eric, I think you and I talked about this on the last podcast we did together. Tony, weren't there other luminaries from the Back to the Future universe, some of the cast and crew, or was that on opening night?
The real big one was the gala performance, but on the preview performance, I mean, Bob Gale is always down at the theatre as soon as they open in London, when they change the cast, when they open Broadway. Bob Gale's always around. Alan Silvestri and Glenn Ballard as well, the music and lyrics guys. They're always hanging around for the first few previews, so they were there. Yeah, I'm not sure on the opening preview who else was there. I mean, obviously the producer, Colin Ingram, director John Rando, like they were all hanging around. But no, the big night was the gala performance in July.
Yeah, that was where I think, you know, Michael J. Fox and the like were there in that one. But guys, look, I was telling Eric this, Tony, last time that I had him on the show was I got the book, the Back to the Future musical book, but I didn't crack the spine on it because I said I don't want to know anything about it until I see the musical itself. And again, I'm actually pretty proud of myself for not getting spoiled on anything going into it. And I will say, and people will hear it before our conversation, but, you know, I was so enthralled and blown away by this. Now, I'm a theater fan. I'm a musical fan. I go to Broadway as often as I can. There's a lot of shows in Houston that I go to. I mean, I've been at the theater 4 or 5 times this year in Houston. Love it. And this show, I'm not being hyperbolic, I promise, is the most impressive performance I've ever seen in a live theater situation. I mean, from the production, from the musical numbers, the changing of the sets, the way the theater was decorated, even like the opening before the show starts, the little countdowns and the way that everything is set up. I was blown away by. I can't even begin to tell you. Was that your first experience too, Tony, of just like, wow, look at what they were able to pull off with this? Yeah,
I'm getting goosebumps from you just describing it now. I saw the first previews back in Manchester when they opened, and they had their limited 12-week run, and I had no idea what to expect. And even then, especially then, there'd been, because there's no production photography, there were no trailers. There was like a couple of music videos out where they was just in a studio singing, so you got to hear a couple of the tracks. But apart from that, you really did not know what to expect. I think they had some rehearsal footage where they were in a studio environment, no set pieces, maybe a frame of a DeLorean they were wheeling around. And no, they changed a bit from the openings and, you know, the opening run and things. But that moment that the first scene in Doc's garage, from that moment right through to the finale, like my face was just aching from grinning. Like it was just... Yeah, no point did I stop smiling and like just being immersed in what was happening. And to be honest, with each different iteration of it, so the same when they opened in London, when they do the cast change in London, they make slight tweaks each year. When they open on Broadway, they've made some tweaks, and every single one, it's just like seeing it again for the first time with a brand new cast, a new refreshed take on it. So you still get that first watch feeling again and again and again whenever you go and see it.
Oh man, well, as you're talking, like I'm remembering my whole experience, like frame for frame. Eric, same for you, right? Did you remind me? Did you stay spoiler free mostly going into it? Because that doesn't seem like your style.
Kind of yes, kind of no.
Yeah.
To answer your question, that was kind of my same experience. So I think without disparaging other franchises, we all know that Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis are very protective over Back to the Future
Yes.
and what they will allow in an official capacity the franchise to be used for. So the fact that they have their hands direct in this and all that, I was very optimistic going into it that it was going to blow my mind. Even with all that expectation, it still just blew me away beyond anything I could have thought of. So like basically the same thing Tony said, like just you you're speechless watching this as you just found out. But as far as the spoilers go and all that, I kind of stayed spoiler free. I didn't look into like insider stuff. Like one of the groups that Tony manages is a spoilers group. I stayed out of that. But when the cast recording came out, I think it was last March, I think maybe March of 2022, I think. From that day forward, I listened to it almost every day. So there's a couple spoilers as far as plot goes within the cast recording, but beyond that, I stayed spoiler free.
Yeah, it was so hard for me not to, because I'm such a music guy. It was so hard for me to not listen to that cast recording for a year, 18 months, and stay away from it. Now, okay, this is really where I want to get into the, as we say, meat and potatoes of the subject here, because as Eric said, we know the Bobs are very protective of the franchise, as they should be. Now, I'm going to say something here that's going to surprise a lot of people, because I have always been like, hey, man, I'm not rooting for it, but if they make a Back to the Future 4, they do a TV series, I'm 100% open to it. Go ahead. If it's great, it's great. I have changed my entire view on that after the musical. And I'll tell you why. Because when it started at first, when the musical begins, I was so nervous. And this is going to sound crazy, I know, but this is my real feeling, so I don't mind saying it. I was so nervous it wasn't going to be good. I was so nervous. I was like, please do not take down my love for Back to the Future at all. I'm not joking. I felt it in my stomach when I saw Doc's Garage on stage, and I was like, oh, yeah, I cannot do this to myself if they make a bad Back to the Future project or movie. I didn't like how I was feeling. And then as soon as the gentleman who's playing Marty, which I believe is now changed, but at the time I think it was is his last name?
Casey Likes.
Okay.
Casey
Likes is still the main. Yeah,
he's still the main. Okay. Yeah. So Casey, as soon as he comes out and he starts doing the Doc's Garage beginning, I'm like, okay, I like this, but I was a little hesitant to commit. And it was somewhere after the amplifier explodes that I was like all in on this. Now, here's what I want to ask you all. Eric, let me start with you. Because you told me, Eric, there was going to be slight modifications from the original story. And already in the Doc's Garage scene, I remember there's a few small changes, right? I mean, there's not the radio commercial for this, or there's the radio playing, and it's not the TV for the plutonium case, right? The story of it from the news reporter. There's small little things like that going on. Marty's trying to stop a recording, I believe, of Doc, if memory serves me correct, instead of just wanting to knock the amplifier out of control or what have you. When you started seeing these small changes at the very beginning, Eric, what was your immediate reaction? Let me ask you that. What was your immediate reaction? Was it like, oh, cool, I like that this is different, or whoa, what's going on here?
Big smile on my face.
Big smile.
Yeah, so kind of going back to what I said before, I'm glad that they didn't phone this in. You know, there's plenty of places where a big name has been placed on a production of anything, whether it's a Broadway show or something else, where they phone it in and just expect you to buy based on the name alone. Back to the Future, the musical, didn't do that. They have all these subtle changes. So like that initial intro, I think, is perfect for the stage. It gets you hyped up. So in the movie, it makes sense in the movie that scene is drawn out, building up to him plugging into the amplifier and all that. Doesn't make sense to do that in a musical form. You're going to get the crowd bored already. So for that scene to go so quickly and build up so quickly into that amplifier scene and then break out into song, I think it was a perfect change. It was great the way it was.
Tony, for you, when you started noticing the early differences between the film version and the stage version, again, were you apprehensive or were you kind of in for the ride?
Yeah, I think I was really apprehensive when I first even heard they were doing the musical. In my head, I'd got it down. This was like years before it was released as well. I'd got it down as like a jukebox musical where they were going to pull in like, popular 50s songs and 80s songs. And, I had this vision in my head of, Marty standing on stage at the Enchantment of the Sea dance playing Johnny Be Good. But apart from that, everything else was could be sketchy. Like, what they're going to do with it. But no, as soon as, for a start, the set was amazing. So as soon as you see Doc's lab, they've put the detail in. For any fan of the movie, you can immediately start to look at Easter eggs and things on the stage. And then you're trying to pay attention to what's going on. And of course, there are differences. And I think, as Eric says, the opening scene of the movie would not work on stage because it's using so many close-ups of clocks and it's taking you along on this journey. And you can't do that on the stage. You can't do close-ups. So you've got to do it in other ways. But I think, you go through you start with the Doc's lab. It opens up. You see the town square. You see the clock tower. You've got all these familiar elements. Immediately that they've been paying attention. They've got I think for me, the real big turning point for me was as soon as there's any dialogue, and the dialogue, they've got the dialogue that is in the musical. And for some musicals, there's very little dialogue. It's like all in song. But what they've done is got a really good balance here of using original dialogue from the movie, new dialogue, and song. And I feel they've done a great job of balancing it all out. So it feels super familiar. Those lines, but then occasionally there's a curveball in there, or there's a different line, or there's a different scene. And I think they've done a great job of doing that.
Yeah, I noticed, again, because the three of us, I'm sure, have the original script burned in our memories, line for line, and we know the beats and we know the pauses and the inflections. And I will say Casey likes inflections of Marty were very spot on in my mind to the Michael J. Fox version of the character, and I think we're very true to form. And then the opening number, It's Only a Matter of Time. Really enjoyed the using the original score within that theme. But I want to fast forward a little bit because I don't want to give everyone blow by blow the musical. I don't want to give it away completely. But let's get to the Twin Pines Mall. Okay, so this was where I first started noticing some major differences, especially when it came to the time machine. But even before that, to go off what Tony said, I had a question for both of y'all as of what you thought the reasoning for this was. So when Doc is explaining to Marty how the time machine works, he's going through, say you want to see the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And boom, 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 types it in. Now in the movie, the next line is, or the birth of Jesus Christ, and December 25th, 0000. In the musical, at least in the version that I saw, he says, or witness the assassination of President Kennedy. Okay, and he puts it in. Now, this is my question to you all. Do you think that they took the Jesus Christ line out to just not have any overtures of religion, or did they put that in there to make the joke later about John F. Kennedy land a little bit harder? Tony, you're shaking your head.
I'm nodding for that one. Yeah, I think the writing is really clever, and I think it's no accident that they mention JFK there and then later on.
Yeah, I think Tony froze here first.
There you go. I see you froze. I think my kids are like streaming movies and things. Sorry.
You're fine.
Yeah, I think it's no accident that they mention it at the start and then later on, and they didn't do that in the movie, but for whatever reason, yeah. But I think it doesn't make a huge difference, right? I know this has been discussed in our group, like, the meaning of that and what could it mean, and people can overanalyze and dissect things. But I think that this was an opportunity for Bob to reflect back on the script, I think, and look for those opportunities when there could be an extra gag or an extra loop back, or something else to bring the audience along. Plus, I think that it's possible now. It's a different audience going watching this. There's probably people in the audience who maybe don't know who John F. Kennedy is. And so I think you're planting that seed that someone's been assassinated, and then, years earlier, they're not even president and people won't know who they are. So it's just I think it's just a thread that they introduced.
Now, there's a lot different in this scene that I also I got to get Eric in on you on. But first, actually, before that, when the DeLorean makes its debut on the stage, it's one of the most fantastic moments of not just that musical, but anything I've ever seen in live entertainment, because you get the flashes of light throughout the Winter Garden Theater where we saw it, and the light is built out around the boxes that are in the balcony, and then all of a sudden the DeLorean just appears on the stage. And look, I'm somebody who I've worked in entertainment for a long time. I like looking at the behind the scenes. I've worked in theater before at a smaller level, worked in pro wrestling, which is its own version of theater. And I know how we in the business say gimmick things. I cannot figure out that DeLorean, which I love. And I'm sure y'all both know exactly how it happened, and you can break it down for me second by second. But I did not know how it happened. It was one of the moments, which is one of the most pure moments of my experience, where my wife and I look at each other and go, how did they do that? You know, it was just such an awesome moment. Did you have that too, Eric, when the DeLorean makes its first appearance?
I did exactly that. Kind of like you were talking about earlier. It blew me away. We were sitting there, and even just expecting everything that we were expecting, when those lights started flashing and that DeLorean basically just appears out of thin air, like I clenched my wife's hand. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane."
When that happened, that's when I go, I'm in. Like, I'm all the way in. As soon as that happens, any trepidation that I might have had, any over-analyzing, like Tony was saying about the different lines and what could they mean, it was all gone. It was all gone at the moment of the DeLorean. Now, there's a few changes with this scene. Obviously, there's no Einstein. I understand. That's an obvious cut for the stage, and how are you going to do that? Are you going to put a person as a dog? No, that's not going to work. Do you want a dog dummy? No, you can't train a dog to be in the musical and hit his spot every single time, probably. Never work with kids and animals, right, is the old showbiz term. So I get that. And Tony, do you feel that why do you feel that they added the voice activation of the DeLorean? It seemed to me at first, it seems a hurt, like, I don't know. I'm not gonna say unnecessary, but I didn't understand the reasoning behind it. But I wasn't against it.
Yeah, I think I don't know whether it's Bob who spoke about this or John or some of the creative team. You know, when anyone is ever entering the dates into the DeLorean, you see them entering the keypad and see the screen and the time circuits. And it's back to what I was saying about the opening scene. They're using close-ups there, and you can see what people are doing. You cannot do a close-up of inside the DeLorean, the time circuits. You can see them, actually. If you're in the right seats, you can see the time circuits and the keypad. Everything's in the DeLorean. But the effect of, like, entering a date and seeing it on the screen is recreated for the stage by you speak the date into the voice circuits, and then it gets repeated by the voice of the DeLorean. And also, there is a voice-activated DeLorean in the animated series. And so there's like a loop back to a possible... I think there's lots of different parts of the franchise where they have borrowed things from. I think there's some references to some things from the game, from the original script, from the novelization, I think... Bob knows all of this stuff because he governs over all of it, where he reviews it before it gets published. And so I think I have heard them say that that's, they realize that they can't do that. The flux capacitor, right? Doc gets it, brings it out of the car and shows it to Marty. Right. Whereas in the movie, you're just like, it's here over my shoulder. And so, they were really careful to make sure that the audience still gets that same feeling, but using tricks of the stage rather than close-ups as you can do in movies.
That actually makes perfect sense. Do you think that, and then just making it Doc's voice, Eric, was instead of because you remember in the climax of the movie where Marty's about to go back to the future, the DeLorean stops, right, and it doesn't work, and there's the timer on the dashboard. There's all these things. Was the voice activation there just to make us go, oh man, he can't get back to save Doc because he can't change the time because only Doc can do that?
Yeah, so I got a huge kick out of the voice activation. I didn't know about any of that going in. And I don't know the behind-the-scenes reasons as to why, but everything Tony said makes sense. But it's one of those changes that makes you realize that even as the biggest Back to the Future fan, you don't know what's to come. So you don't know what that ending's going to be like. And adding in that recognition of Doc's voice makes you realize, like, oh, Marty's not going to have an easy time getting back. And it adds so much humor, like him trying to impersonate Doc later. It's such a great moment.
And Roger Bart, who played Doc in the version that I saw, and has been probably the most frequent Doc that we've seen in the play, is just so good in the role and brings such a different energy than Chris Lloyd, but that I really appreciated. Now, the radioactive suit that is not airtight that Doc used on the Manhattan Project, that isn't as tightly fitting as he thought it was. What did we think of this? Did we like this, Tony? Did we like this angle? I get why you don't do the Libyans thing, especially 2023, especially with all the stuff that's going on in the world and that's happened since 85. Might want to stray away from terrorism and bombs and things of that nature. I understand that. Did you like this kind of change?
Yeah, I think, like you say, when you're watching it, you start to clock these differences, and that was like, this is a major one. And I think it's obvious why as well. They can't have like a Volkswagen camper van driving on the stage, and so they would have to have people running on. It just kind of wouldn't work to have any kind of like chase like that. I think this is another one of those nice references. Like in the comic books, they talk a little bit about the Manhattan Project days with Doc. And you sort of like, you're building a bit of character with him. Like you realize he's been doing this sort of thing for years. He's not just like, an inventor. He's also like, he's a scientist at the end of the day. I think, there's lots of different things they could have done with how, Marty would have to save Doc, like what his future is going to be if Marty doesn't go and change it. But it works. Like to use a line out of the musical. But I think it's not one of the. For me, it's just incidental. It's like I'm on board with it. Like it works. It's there. That's what happens. Okay, I understand that now. Let's keep going with it. Yeah.
Did you have
also
any
a very
issues with it,
humorous?
Eric?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
No,
go ahead.
I didn't have any issues with it. I think it's a very humorous moment for the younger kids in the crowd too. Like, oh, he ripped his pants, ha ha ha. I could see his undies, kind of thing. No, I had no issue with it. I agree 100% that they needed to not include terrorists and stuff like that, because this is supposed to have mass appeal. This is supposed to be something you can bring your kids to, and just taking that out of it was a good choice. And this is probably the most major thing, that, going back to what I said before, that is spoiled if you listen to the cast recording before you go see the play, is that you can hear from the cast recording that there's no terrorist. He got radiated. So I knew that going in. I just didn't know how they were going to pull off that incident. And I like how they did it. I think it's obviously an important and serious scene, because if you're immersing yourself in the play, Doc is dying before your eyes. But they did it in a way that still gives it that humorous feeling and still keeps you like upbeat through it. So I think they did it really well.
I will add this, right? A lot of people think that Roger Bart and the way he plays Doc is like really comedic, and he's like using lots of physical humor and physical comedy. But if you watch how Roger Bart is dying in that moment, like you believe it. Like he is playing the absolute truth that Doc is dying. And never once does he break out of that character. I mean, obviously he's a professional and he's an amazing actor. But I think people don't realize that in that moment, that is happening. He is radiated, he's dying, and he plays that truth. It's really moving when you watch him do it, actually.
It is too. And a lot of the times for stage in general, you have to play bigger, right? Just for the room. You got to play to the back row, is what people say. And I understand although Chris Lloyd plays plenty big in the Back to the Future movies, I understand why Roger Bart might have turned it up an extra level in certain segments and scenes. But to what Tony said, his whole disposition changes in that moment. Even the way he holds his shoulders, the timbre of his voice. gets into a lower register. He realizes the error in his ways almost instantly. And what I like about this change, and not that I want to change anything about the movie, but if they had done this in the movie, I wouldn't have minded, because it actually adds even more to the ticking clock. Because he's not dead when Marty leaves, right? For all intents and purposes, when he gets shot by the terrorist, we're to believe that Doc is gone, like 100% gone, which is why Marty has to get back earlier to try to prevent the shooting. In this one, he's got radiation poisoning, and he's trying to. We know that there's the proverbial ticking clock going off. So it's this extra layer. Not only does Marty have to hit the clock tower by this certain time, can he get back in time to save his friend Doc? I thought that the radiation, even the effect of the gloves on the stage, was just so good. And that just gets me back to the production. I don't know what the budget is for the production of this musical. It's got to be astronomical. There is so much money spent on this, and you can see it spent on the production. The swing sets that they have, just the lighting, the musical cues, the graphics that are incorporated. And I actually like how they incorporate a lot of the graphics of when Marty's driving. Like the driving scenes in the DeLorean, they feel good. It doesn't seem like, oh, I'm sitting in a chair and just moving my arms, right? Like you see and feel the action of the moment. And when he's transported to the Peabody house in the 50s, it's great. It's just a great moment, man. I loved it completely. Now, another big change, well, not so much a big change, but when you get into some of the musical numbers, I did like how they told the story, obviously, especially in the first act. You have this overture of Marty feeling like he has no future, which I don't think was as explicit in the movie. I mean, you got the feeling of he had this sense of rejection, that he like his old man. But I don't remember Marty so much worrying about his future, but I liked how they implemented this as an overture, Eric, throughout the theme of the musical.
Yes. So I agree. I think they added quite a bit more backstory with some of the characters. I'm sure we'll get to it, but think of like Goldie, for example.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more backstory with the characters, and I really like that with the musical. Kind of like you were saying about Roger before, these actors, they're not trying, like Roger Bart is not trying to play Christopher Lloyd. Roger Bart is presenting his version, his best version of Doc Brown. And Casey Likes and Ollie Dobson and all the other actors that have played Marty are presenting their version of Marty McFly. They're not trying to be Michael J. Fox. And as far as the writing and the production goes, yeah, I fully agree. That backstory, like, it really helps immerse you in the experience. And there's a lot of, when you're watching the movie, you can kind of assume and make up your kind of own backstory for Marty and wonder, is he the confident, popular teenager? Is he the not confident teenager who kind of gets bullied? Or is he a quiet kid? Is he a loud kid? All that stuff you kind of make up in your mind. Whereas in the musical, they set it straight for you, and they tell you the exact type of person Marty is. There's no question about it. They give you the sympathy for him, and they get you really rooting for him. Not that you're not rooting for him in the movie, but like you really feel for Marty just through all those musical numbers, and really feel like he's down on his luck, feeling bad about himself, and you get to really watch him rise from that. It's great. I love how they did it.
Now, you mentioned a character in Tony. I want to ask you about this one, because one of the show-stealing characters, especially in his particular number as well, is Goldie Wilson. Goldie Wilson hits some high highs for me in the musical. Did you enjoy kind of the expanded role, of Goldie?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think, in the original cast, Cedric Neal, who's on the original cast recording, he's got the most amazing voice. And so to see him in that number and like all the cast around him and him leading that ensemble number was amazing. And then, to see him come back again in a couple of the other cafe scenes, and, he's now got a thing with Doc, like helping Doc set up the weather experiment. And really sticking it to like Lou Carruthers. Like, I think I think it's nice to see that additional bit of screen time for Goldie. And I don't know whether you picked up on this, but there's a subtle difference between the movie and the musical. But in the movie, in the original 1985 timeline, at the start of the movie, Goldie is mayor. He's already elected. He's already mayor. In the musical, he's not mayor yet. He's running to be mayor. But at the end of the movie, he is mayor. And so there's one of the changes that has happened as a result of, the new timeline, that now Goldie is actually already elected as mayor in 1985. So in the original timeline, we don't know whether he would ever have even been mayor. Or he must have been, actually, because, Martin knows he's running for mayor, but he doesn't know that he's whether he's going to get elected. So yeah, there's a little bit.
You know what? I actually didn't pick up on that in my first.
Me neither.
I didn't pick up on that he wasn't the mayor yet. And you neither, Eric?
Nope.
Yeah.
Did not.
Wow. See, that's what repeat viewings go. So now I got to go back. Now I got to convince the wife. Can we go next weekend and see this again? Now there's a few other things that I want to touch on with the musical. Now there was an intermission after obviously Act 1 ends. During the intermission, there was a young family in front of me. A husband, 2 kids, both boys, probably 8 and 10 if I had to guess, and the wife. And these 2 boys, man, I'm not lying to you. I actually started to tear up when I heard them talking about how much fun they were having. Oh man, this is just like the movie. And oh man, Dad, did you see when they changed it? And they're so fans. And I'm thinking, these kids were born in the 2010, maybe 2015. They might have been born in 2015, if my math is right. And they are so over the top enthralled, just like me, just like Tony, you, just like Eric, when y'all saw it. And it did speak to the generational aspect of this movie and what's drawn me to this story for so many decades. And my love affair with this franchise was reaffirmed, not only seeing the musical, but seeing these 2 kids who don't know, to what Tony said earlier, who probably John F. Kennedy is, have no idea who Ronald Reagan, the actor, is, have no really recollection of the 50s, because to them, the 50s is probably the 90s, right? In their minds. But they love Back to the Future. And it was such a beautiful moment. And I just had to say that. Now, coming out of Act 1 into Act 2, the 21st Century number is so much fun. And you really get, and you know what, you talk about expanded backstories, you actually understand Roger Bart's Doc so much more, even from a number like that, which is supposed to be kind of this fun, upbeat number. But Tony, I feel like it reveals a lot about Doc.
Yeah, I think I love it. I think this is one that really takes you by surprise. For a start, like, you know whereabouts you are in the story. You kind of know in your head, if you've watched the movies, you know what's going to come next. And no one expects this. I think it does lose some people. I've seen people say like, oh, absolutely love the musical, but what the heck? Like, was that needed? But I think, like you say, you learn a bit about him, and you learn that, like, this is what's going on inside his head.
Yes.
And this is, like, really, he is actually, a visionary and very aspirational about where he wants to be. And he's thinking about the future constantly, and even more so when Marty arrives. So yeah, I think it does teach you a little bit about him. And, it is a nice nod to the present. If you think about when Back to the Future came out, Back to the Future came out and it was the present. 1985 was now. And then, like, they were traveling back to 55. These days, if you go and watch it, it's all like going to be all completely historic and retro. And it's like 85 and 55. That's years ago. So at least, he's gone to the 21st century, the year 2020, as it happens. And so he can talk about some of the things that have happened since 1985 to the 21st century. And we know that some of them are true and some of them don't make sense. I think it's great fun.
Yeah, and I could see why some people might think, like, if you told me, Eric, hey, man, that 21st century number jumped the shark for me a little bit, I could see why maybe you might say that. But to me also, it's the most musical number of the musical, right? Like when you think of like the traditional musical, like a big set, big dancers, there's the flash, there's the props, there's the toys, and I mean that's sprinkled throughout. But this one, in my opinion, was needed to not only start off the second act. I think it was perfect to start the second act off, but this was almost a good palate cleanser of let's have a little bit fun here at the beginning of the act. Let's get the juices flowing again before we jump right back into the story.
Yes, I agree. I think it was needed. I totally agree with both of you. I can understand some people maybe tuning out from that, but I loved it. And going back to my history with building up to seeing the musical and just listening to the cast recording, there was two things regarding this that I had predicted and questioned. I could tell just by listening to the recording that the end of Something About That Boy was going to be the end of Act 1, 21st Century was going to be the start of Act 2. It just had that feel. So I predicted that correctly. And then with 21st Century, I kept questioning in my mind all the way up to that first preview. What is the situation here? Is Doc dreaming, or is he like singing to Marty about what he predicts the future is going to be? And obviously we got the answer. He's, having the dream sequence. I think it was great. I think they did it very well. It's very flashy. Yeah. Could some say maybe it's too flashy? Sure. But I think it's great the way it is. And circling back to those kids that you just mentioned, the 8 and 10-year-olds, I'll bet you they loved it. I will bet you that they were so enthralled by it and absolutely loved that scene. This is not a play that is catering only to the people that were watching the movie in 1985. Like I said before, this is catering to kids too. And I'll bet you every single kid loved that show and that musical number.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because when I was a kid, so I'm here in Houston, Texas. Fans of the show probably know where I'm located, but there's a legendary play in the Texas area, and it's called Greater Tuna, and they have a one that succeeds it called Tuna Christmas, and it's two guys who play all the characters. It's about in this small town in Texas, so they're real country and whatever. And there's a scene that everybody talks about in Tuna Christmas where one of these characters sees a spaceship. That's like his character arc throughout the whole thing. I saw a flying saucer. I saw a flying saucer. And in the play, at one point, all the lights are going crazy and a ramp comes down to where it looks like he's going onto a spaceship, and he walks on the ramp and leaves. People who love the tuna plays go, I couldn't get past them, RR getting on the spaceship. They really just lost me at that moment. As a kid, to Eric's point, it was my favorite part of the play. Like, oh my God, the spaceship came down and they got him. So the things that we might not have the sensibility for, is my point, as adults, the kids probably were in love with the fact that he's on the quote unquote hoverboard, or the small things. And even playing to the time, because Tony mentioned it's in 2020, playing to the world was rid of diseases, and everybody, 2020 was a great year, or whatever the lines were. I thought was really funny and clever. The scene in the cafeteria between Biff and Marty, and when he hits him, and then immediately they freeze, and Lorraine starts singing, and but then they do the chase around the whole school. And they're running on the tables, they're throwing knives, they're hiding in lockers, they're hiding in classrooms. We got to see this expanded version of Hill Valley High that we didn't really get in the movie. As far as the challenge of pulling off a scene like that night after night and hitting all the cues and the numbers and everything that pretty much could go wrong within that scene, especially even the Darth Vader moment and the lightsabers at the top of the lockers, which I thought was real cute. That was so impressive to me, Tony, from a production standpoint.
Yeah, it's a wild number for the end of Act 1. You always like to end Act 1 on a big number. And I think when you read the Creating Back to the Future, the musical book, you'll learn that I think they were going to end Act 1 on Back in Time. They were going to put Back in Time into the musical. They were going to have Marty singing about how he's got to get back in time, back to 1985. And so they didn't know for a long time that they were going to end Act 1 on this number. But how could they not? Like, there's so much going on. Some of the ensemble characters have like 3 costume changes in that number. Like they during the thing, the set reel takes, they run off, get changed, come back on. They're a different character. Now they're a teacher instead of a pupil or a cheerleader, or all of this stuff's going on. You get to see like the dinner room, or the lunchroom, the gym, the French classroom. Like, it's just wild. And there's some great like little tricks and illusions in there that they use. Great fight coordination. Like, you see they do the like fight call every day, like in the rehearsals. Whenever they do an Instagram takeover, you see them, they're stepping through those moves. They got to get them all right. And there's some really nice little moments in there that's easy to miss. So on a repeat viewing, like if you look at the end, like just before the curtain comes down, like Lorraine's singing, she puts her hand back and she touches George's chest, and George is like, she's touched me. Oh my God. And his face is like he's over the moon, and he's so excited because Lorraine's finally touched him. So there's so much, your eyes don't know where to look. Like, watch the lunch lady, she's hilarious. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant number. Love it.
2 things that I just popped in my head that you made me think of. First, in the 21st century, to go back to that for a moment, the slight trickery and the sleight of hand of, you see Doc leaving with this cast of people, and then next thing you know, he's right there on the couch. It was a great moment. It was one of those things that I'm like, God, they got me. And then the actor, and y'all can remind me his name, who plays George right now on Broadway.
Hugh Coles.
What is it?
Hugh Coles steals the show.
Wow, does he nail George McFly? Does he ever just nail the voice, the mannerisms, but also adds his own element to George that Crispin didn't do in the original, or Jeffrey Wiseman in the subsequent sequels? Oh man, does he nail his George McFly? And especially in that scene, what you're talking about, Tony, there's so much interplay. Now, I want to fast forward a little bit. I want to go to, we're at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Again, there are small differences. When Biff takes Marty out of the car when he's in there with Lorraine, and they put him in the trash can and lock the dumpster, as opposed to the car. Understandable. It's more of a means to an end thing than a change to the story. It's just like, let's not bring a big car and have him slice his hand and do all this. We'll put him in a trash can. I enjoyed that element of it. And also, when we get to the DeLorean and Marty getting ready to go back to the future, and we see the clock tower scene of Doc going up the clock tower and then standing on the ledge and singing This One's for the Dreamers again, having that reprise in the musical, which I thought was a really beautiful number to have at that moment. But just the production element. Like, I know it's a little comical of him going up the stairs the way that they do it, but, it's a nice little sight gag. And then him standing on the ledge, like, you felt the power of that moment, right, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the going up the stairs is a hilarious moment. Roger hands it up really well. Again, that's a moment I think it loses some people. This is a fun production. It's not meant to be a serious play. There's serious elements and serious moments to it, but you're laughing with them. You're not laughing at it. It's not done pathetically. It's done so well. But otherwise, it's like, well, how did Doc get up there? I mean, it's in the movie, it's a mystery. Like, how does he get from outside the clock tower up to the top? Well, now you know. He like runs up the stairs. But I think, that the mixture of the automated set, the real set, the big clock that's lit up bright, that's life size, the 2 big cats that you're all familiar with, and you see the whole clock tower come on stage, and it's a mixture of projection and real sets, and it's seamless, and it moves in time with the music, and you believe that Doc is, I still twitch a little bit when a bit of the clock tower falls away, because you believe that he's up there and he's on that ledge and he's falling off, and Roger's holding on to the clock. No, when they did this whole scene originally in Manchester, the whole thing was much, 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 much longer. So they were, I think at one point they even have the clock tower and the car on the stage at the same time, and you see one and the other. And they were really refining that through that preview process in Manchester. And now it's like, to be honest, I think it did feel like a lot's happening, but you're not making much progress. Whereas now it's like action, 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 action. And there's practical things they have to do to change between the car, like driving, and the clock tower scene. But now it's perfectly cut. It's just brilliant. And yeah, bringing For the Dreamers in again, for Doc to sing that, and then the overture, or the score underneath it. What an amazing end.
It's a beautiful moment. Now, again, there's a couple more things I want to cover. Now, Eric, he gets back to 1985. Okay, we see him get back to the future, and Red is there as we know him, the homeless man. Red is on the bench, or the bum, or whatever you want to call him. And but this is a big difference. You know, whereas in the movie we see Marty return to Lion Estates, which do we get a Lion Estates in here at all? Is there ever any reference to Lion Estates or the signage? I don't think so.
I can't think of any. Tony, can you?
I want to say,
do we see a flash of it?
It might be on one of the benches, you know.
Yeah, maybe something subtle, but I don't think they mentioned anything. Or
Hilldale is definitely on one of the benches, and they mention Hilldale there. Of course, you see the house, like you see the set before they do "Hello, is anyone home?" You see the classic Marty McFly house, the residence.
You see the house, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know whether they mention Lion Estates anywhere. I don't think you see the.
You definitely don't see the two lions.
Entrance. Yeah.
You do see Fox photography, which is a nice little reference to Michael J. Fox, obviously. And there's small things. Like I think it may have been in the 21st Century number where you see the dinosaur. Is that in the 21st Century number? At one point you see a dinosaur. I think that's where that was.
There's tons more Easter eggs in that scene as well, projected on the back wall.
Yeah, a bunch behind. And they're just not all coming to me. But okay.
Did you ever expect to see a TARDIS in the Back to the Future universe?
Wait, where?
Wasn't there a TARDIS in 21st Century from Doctor Who?
I must have missed it.
There's the time train from Back to the Future 3.
I saw the time train.
Yeah.
I saw the time train, which was a nice addition. Now, here at the end, in the original movie, obviously he goes back to his house and, you know, Mom, you're thin, or whatever it is. Or you know, he sees his mom. She looks great. Everybody's in a better spot. George has his book get delivered, whatever. In this one, it's completely different. This is probably the most complete change of the end. Is they're not at the house, they're in front of the clock tower, appropriately. And Eric, it's George McFly Day in Hill Valley, and they're presenting him with an award, and he's also, I think they're accepting, or he's talking about his new novel, Back to the Future 4. The Continuing Adventures of Calvin Klein, or whatever the full title is, which is so appropriate. I love that they made that change. But what did you think, Eric, when you were watching of this different ending?
I loved it. It's another one of those things I wanted to be surprised by this. I didn't want them to just put the same movie up on the stage, because then you know what's coming. So this was a welcome change. I loved the whole setup. And I think they really did a great job, just like they do in the movie, of showing the change to George McFly and how he goes from a non-confident teenager to this confident, well-kept man and father and husband, and just showing what a great person he is. And I also think, and maybe I'm thinking too much into this, I know there was a lot of controversy after Back to the Future 1 as far as Crispin Glover and how George McFly was handled, and how apparently money made him happy and all that stuff. Whereas I feel like this ending in the musical is more about not the financial part of it. I mean, yeah, they do obviously focus on the financials with the check and all that, but they just show him just being an all-around generally happy person. And I feel like it was as far as the stage goes, it's a very satisfying ending, in my opinion.
And Tony, you agree with me or not, but I feel like if they would have done the original ending from Back to the Future, it wouldn't have been as satisfying as this ending. And if they would have tried to do this ending in the movie, it would not have worked.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think Eric's got a good point there. They touch on the money, but it's like, the McFly family are doing something good with their money, giving it to like the Clock Tower Preservation Society.
Yeah.
They're part of the community. It's not about them just being rich and like buying a 4x4 for the son. Like there's no mention of the 4x4. And so I think they've balanced that out a little bit. But also it just wouldn't have worked to arrive at the town square, then back to Twin Pines Mall, then back to Line Estate. Like you couldn't do that many set changes. No, the book, the novel is hilarious joke. It's a proper in-joke for anyone who knows anything about Back to the Future and reboots. In the early shows, it was Back to the Future 2. So they used to say it's Back to the Future 2 because you're watching Back to the Future, so it's the sequel that's been written. And I think somewhere I read or heard it was Alan Silvestri who suggested we should make it 4. And everyone was like, yes, like that is a perfect joke. So yeah, it works really, really well. It's great.
I do love the two other small things I want to bring up before I get to the end is I like how Biff. First of all, we haven't really talked about Biff too much. Biff is great in this one, but I like how Biff is the one who's selling George the peanut brittle, as opposed to because in the movie the peanut brittle scene gets cut from the movie where it's like a neighbor and his daughter selling it. I like how it's Biff selling it for his niece or his nephew, one of the two, in the movie. I like that. And then I also like how they used Huey as we're supposed to know him, Huey, which we're assuming it's Huey Lewis, and how it's Jennifer's is it her uncle?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Her uncle, and then he wants to hear the Pinheads play. Marty is unaware that he's supposed to play at this big event for his dad, and that's where they finally give you the power of love. They tease it earlier in the show. You really wanted it, and then they end it with power of love, which is just phenomenal, by the way. The production of that set piece, and then probably my favorite moment of the musical is when Doc arrives. Something's got to be done. We got to go back to the future, what have you. And they get in the DeLorean, and I'm looking at my wife, and I'm like, oh man, I wonder, they're not gonna, can they? And then that thing rises up, and it starts to fly over the crowd and starts to turn around and upside down, and you see them waving and going like, oh my gosh, what a finish. What a finish to that show, right, Eric? Like with that, I did not expect them to have a flying DeLorean.
It was insane, mind-boggling.
Yes,
how they pull that off, and that's exactly what I was referring to you when I texted you the other day and said, "So, what'd you think about that ending?"
Yeah,
it's all about that DeLorean. It was crazy, and I've seen it. Fortunately, on Broadway 3 times. I never got the opportunity, at least not yet, to see it in London. Never saw it in Manchester. But even on the 3rd viewing in Broadway so far, I was still just blown away. It was like the first time. The fact that they can pull that off, which obviously means they've gone through, rigorous safety checks and all that to make sure this is fully safe.
Right.
And putting that aside and immersing yourself in the experience, just seeing that thing just rise out and just come towards the crowd, and then the turn and everything. It's just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just such an incredible feeling.
Tony, how many times have you seen this?
It's like around 20 something times. I'm not by far, I'm not right up there with the most. I don't live that close, but I've seen it enough, but I'll still keep going.
Yeah. And are you always impressed by that end?
Yeah. And I think, what's great about it is I think you kind of get tricked near the end because they do Power of Love. That's like the big tune that they've not done yet. All the cast are on stage. Like you think that's the end. You think it's going to be the curtain call. They're going to just stop it there. And of course you hear the sonic booms. DeLorean appears again. And then, you get the score underneath, like the same as in the movie. Like, and you know what Doc's going to say. He's dressed the same way. You know the line that he's going to say. And you think, but they're not going to do the flying bit, right? You think they can't do that. So then you see it and it starts to arise and you think, okay, they're going to end it there. And then it starts to come out and you think, that's it. They're going to end it there. And then it turns and you're, what? So I think, I hope you say there's huge spoilers in here before you publish this podcast, but tons of people, they want to talk about this. And I'm surprised you didn't. I'm surprised both of you didn't know that this would happen in the show when you go and watch it for the first time. We've tried to really make sure that even in the spoilers group, we don't really talk about it. But so many people, I think it's confusing as well because you are allowed to take photos and videos of the bows and the back in time
curtain call.
The curtain call. And I think people think Power of Love is the end, and some people start to get their phones out and things. And so, there are people who will take photos and put that. They don't want to spoil it for people, but they want to share this moment that they've just experienced. They stick it online, and that ruins it for everyone. It's like the Back to the Future groups on Facebook. You've got to try and get it off that, because otherwise it does take the edge off a little bit if you know that's going to happen. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a battle, but you hear people talking about the car and how good the car is, and it is all the way through. But that end scene is that's the mind blowing one that you go away talking about to everyone who you don't mind spoiling it for.
It was the best part. I mean, obviously it should be the most memorable part, and it is. And that's why, Eric texted me when he knew I saw it. What'd you think of that ending, man? It was sensational. And again, thank you to Bob, Gail, and Zemeckis, and anybody who made this musical possible. I know it was in talks for a long time, and I'm so thankful that they were able to find a way to continue our love for this franchise and create new fans of this franchise. It was just a beautiful, beautiful musical that, like I said a minute ago, reaffirmed my love for something that I've spent endless hours talking about, watching, thinking about, writing about. And I appreciate you, Eric and Tony, for taking the time to just kind of let me unload and decompress over it, because I saw it now a week ago at the time that we're doing this, exactly a week ago. And I'm still haven't come down from the high that is Back to the Future, the musical. And I've been listening to the soundtrack, and it's just incredible. But Tony, let people know if they want to hear more from you, how can they find you and what everything you're doing musical wise?
Yeah, sure. It's that urge to talk about it that made me set up the Facebook group in the first place. When I first watched it, I went home, I set up a group called Back to the Future, the musical spoilers. Later, we changed the name, so it's now Back to the Future, the musical fans. We do have a separate Broadway page, which is Back to the Future Broadway fans. So we have two separate groups, so you can talk about the West End or Broadway in either of those. You can follow us on social media, BTTF, bway.fans or bttfmusical.fans, depending which production you want to follow. We're on YouTube. Search for us, you'll find where we are. bttfmusical.fans is the website.
And Eric, again, collectbttf.com. But in people, what are your social handles?
Collectbttf.com is where you can find everything. Basically an online historical database of your digital time machine for Back to the Future collectibles, including all of the things that have been released so far and in the future from the musical. I have a few musical things I'll be putting up there that are new that are going to be on the page soon. And as far as socials, you can find me at collectbttf on most major social networks.
I appreciate you all so much for taking the time to sit here and chop it up with me.
Anytime whatsoever.
Thank you so much, Brad.